welcome to NAPOD, where we provide NA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us to be self-supporting by visiting napod.xyz, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 in the virtual basket. If you're also in AA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, Sobercast. Sobercast features AA speakers and workshops in the same format as NAPOD. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for Sobercast, that's 2 words, on any podcast player app, or go to Sobercast.com. Enjoy the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Tonight, please welcome Jeff T. as our speaker.
My name is Jeff. I'm an addict. I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful to be here clean. What happened to that little baby that was crying? That's a beautiful thing. I was telling Roseanne that I like to hear that sound. That's a great sound. Because I know that the baby has a better than average chance of having a better life if their mom or dad's in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. I got props. I do. Just a little something to keep me centered. I already said my name is Jeff. I already said I'm an addict. I'm grateful to be here. I'm glad to be here clean. I guess everybody's getting ready for the holidays. I'm supposed to share my experience, strength, and hope. I do not wish to go into all my drug use. What I want to go into is my experience and how I got here and what I learned here and the hope that I've been given because of the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous in rooms like this and people like you. I've been blessed since my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I haven't found it necessary to pick up. And that's through perseverance, stubbornness, and pig-headedness. I absolutely refuse sometimes, no matter how bad it was, because when I first got here, someone told me, don't pick up no matter what. Someone told me to come early to the meeting, leave late, and don't ever leave before the meeting closes with the prayer. So when I first got here, I was like, just tell me what to do. See that? I'm already hearing messages. So anyway, when I first got here, when they said, don't leave before the meeting closes, I wouldn't. Even though I was really addicted to smoking cigarettes, I stayed in my seat for that one little 25 minutes or a half hour or for the hour of the meeting, thinking that I may hear something from the podium or from that circle of people that just might impact or change my life. And sure enough, it did, because apparently here I am 28 years, 6 months, and a couple of days later, and I still haven't found it necessary to use. And it's not because I'm smarter than the average bear. I'm living proof that if an idiot like me, and I use that with a lot of love because I'm a lovable idiot, if an idiot like me can stay clean as long as I have, anybody can do it. Anybody. And if you're new back to this program, I applaud the courage that you show by coming back to these rooms. Because I've stayed in these rooms rather than go out there, because I believe that this is my last recovery. I firmly believe that with every ounce of my being, with every bit of my fiber and every cell in my body, that this is my last recovery. I got one more relapse. I don't have another recovery. I believe that. And I don't know why I believe that, but I do. So it's kept me in the rooms more times than not. And I am living proof that you can stay clean in spite of your character defects. Believe me, you can overcome adversity. You can overcome anything and not have to pick up over it. So here's how I got here. Man, all of a sudden the room filled up. I'm nervous. Do I sound nervous? No. Good. Tricked you. No, I'm nervous. Inside I'm going like this. Here's how I got here. I moved here from Denver, Colorado, with a lady named Patricia Carcillo. And it was 1977. It was November 24th, 1977. I pulled into Phoenix, Arizona, and I rented an apartment on 16th Street in Osborne. And on November 28th, this lady passed away in my arms after a massive injection of a substance that's been known to blow people's hearts up. And she died of what was called in the time as pulmonary hypertension. And what happened was in that moment, this is a lady that had been with me for like 4 or 5 years. She was my running partner. I would trust her with everything. I trusted her with everything. And at that moment when she passed before my eyes and she looked in the eyes and she looked at me and looked in my eyes and she said, I'm going out. And that was it. She drew her last breath and she went out. Addiction is a cunning enemy of life. The first thing was sadness, and the second thing was, how could you do this to me? See, self-centeredness is the core of my disease. Self-seeking and self-centeredness. And the second thought in my mind was, how could you do this to me? Here I am in Phoenix, Arizona, all alone. And when she passed, I took her, the ambulance came and she was gone. And then, it talks about it. Hey, Louie. It talks about it in our book, how about you step across that line between sanity and insanity. You can no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs. And that's basically what happened. What I had is I stepped over the edge and I started going from hotel to motel, and I had all this money and I had all this other stuff that kept me going into that insane life. And I kept on doing more and more and more and finding ways and means to get more. No matter how much I used, I couldn't put my conscience, heart, soul, whatever you want to call it, I couldn't quiet the brain. And I didn't know what to do. So the only thing that I came up with was suicide. So it was either homicide or suicide. And I was going down into the most nastiest, dirtiest, rottenest, schemiest, scummiest parts of town with a roll of bills this thick, and I couldn't get anybody to kill me. And I didn't know that until I got clean. And in retrospect, I realized how crazy that behavior was. So I wound up in a hotel. And some of you guys that are in this room probably said, damn, where was he when I needed him? But sorry, guys, you missed me. I met a girl in the rooms the other day just today. She was born on the day I got clean. And she's in the rooms now. How beautiful is that? So I wound up. Hi, Richard. Amphetamines, no. I wound up on Central Avenue in a hotel on the top floor, and I had made the decision that I was going to end my life. I made this decision that I could no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs. What I had digressed to is sitting in closets, listening to conversations from the other side of the room and knowing they were talking about me. What I had become was a mindless animal, no longer functioning as a human being. What I had become was a person that wore sunglasses 24 hours a day because I couldn't look you in the eyes. And that if you looked in the eyes, you'd see my vulnerability and fear, and then I would have to hurt you. What I had become was certifiably crazy, probably. And I wound up in this hotel room, and I wound up on the 6th floor, and I decided that I was going to jump out the window and land on somebody's late model car and ruin their day too. And that's how I functioned. So I ingested what I considered was a lethal amount of my substance of choice. And I would tell you that if you're interested in the drug that I did, the drug I did was the one that brought you to the threshold of death without really dying. And that's the one I absolutely loved. And I did what I thought was a lethal amount. And a couple of things happened in the course of that next couple of hours when I was in that when I was in a blackout, whiteout, overdose, whatever you want to call it. A couple of things happened. First of all, at 6:30 at night on Channel 10, there's a program that used to come on that was called To Tell the Truth, which I thought was ironic since I knew nothing about the truth. My whole life was a lie. Every piece of identification I had in my wallet was somebody else's. The credit cards I had was somebody else's. I had functioned as this other person for a number of years. And the the person that my mom and dad brought in this world had completely disseminated, actually, was gone. I was a mindless animal. So I made this decision that I was going to die, and then of course, I did what I did, and I remember hearing to tell the truth, and I remember laughing. And then 10:30 at night, I was in my room, I was on the balcony, hanging over the balcony, and the guy walked in my room, and he looked at me, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And how can I say this with all the honesty that I can possibly convey? This gentleman was in my room, and he's saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he was pointing at me. I was on the balcony, I came off the balcony, and I said 3 words, "I don't know." And that was probably the first bit of honesty I had had in 12 years prior. I said, "I don't know." And I came off the balcony, and I walked across the room, and he was gone. And the next thing that happened is I realized that I was no longer loaded. And the third thing that happened is that on Channel 10, Cool Television at that time, they used to say, "Blessed is the nation as God is the Lord," Channel 10, Cool Television, right before they went off the air. And I heard that. And in my heart, I knew that I had to go get help. And I believe that during that brief moment when my eyes blinked, I had embraced the first step of this program. I had admitted I was powerless over my addiction, and my life had become unmanageable. I became to the brink of this close to death. And one more time, the God of my understanding drew me back in and gave me this life that was worth living. I don't believe, for me, that you can get struck loaded. I've met a lot of people that have come into these rooms that have had that moment of clarity, that divine intuition, that awakening of the spirit, where they've been almost like struck clean. And I believe I was struck clean because I had done what I know. I know what I do, and I do what I know, and I know what I put in me. And I know I should have been loaded, but I wasn't. See, I don't believe in slips, and I believe in the power of this program has given me the freedom of choice. And the way I've gotten that freedom of the choice is by working the only step that ever worked perfectly. And that was the first step. The first step of our program is so powerful, and it talks about it on, I think it's the second page of the basic text, where it says not we only admit the fact that we're addicts, but we accept the fact that I'm an addict. And once I accepted the fact that I'm an addict, it made this thing a whole lot easier, because I realized that Eli Lilly's not going to come up with a drug that's going to make me function like a normal human being. There's no magic pill out there. And I don't believe in slips. I believe that if I decided to walk out of the rooms of this fellowship, I'd have to make a conscious choice. This is just for me. This ain't nothing about you. This is just for me. I'd have to make a conscious choice to kill myself. Because for me to ingest a chemical in my body would kill that contact with the God of my understanding. I've never met anybody that came back in the room that have developed a better spiritual awakening. You know? I really haven't. And no one's ever come back through the doors, driving a Cadillac, with a blonde on each arm, and threw $100 bill in the basket and said, "I just stopped in to say hi. It's really fun out there." I came in here beaten, busted, and disgusted, so I can't see. If they tell me that it's a progressive disease and it starts where I left off, well, where I left off was on the sixth floor of a building getting ready to swan dive off of it. You know, so I believe that I don't have a slip left in me. You know, I don't believe in slips. My opinion of a slip is just if I walk down the street and I step on a banana peel, slide on the banana peel through the front door of the pharmacy, hit the Kotex hits the pharmacy in the eye, the loaded rig hits me in the arm, that's a slip. Otherwise, if I make a choice to go out and put a chemical, any chemical into my system, for me, it's an act of desperation to kill myself. And I know one thing, that if I picked up, I lose that conscious contact with the God of my understanding. And I got a powerful higher power. I got a powerful spirit. I got a God that absolutely loves me. He's given me friends. He's given me family. He's given me a fellowship. He's given me a place to laugh, to cry, to sing, to dance, to love. And when I got here, all I did was want to stay clean. I just didn't want to use no matter what. If you want what we have to offer and are willing to make the effort, get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And when I got here, I was teachable. I was like that, like a starving kid that hadn't eaten any spiritual food in a really, really long time. I knew about fear. I knew about insecurity. I knew about low self-esteem. I knew about hate. I knew about hostility. I didn't know anything about honesty, accountability, or integrity. I learned that here from you people. I didn't know how to be a human being. I knew how to be a mindless animal. I knew how to take. I didn't know how to give. I was the type of addict that was a sponge. I'd suck everything I could possibly from you, and then after I wrung you dry, I'd leave. See, everything I ever loved, I lost until I came to Narcotics Anonymous, so I thought. And Narcotics Anonymous taught me about all those things that I thought I lost in love, how to get back. Like my family, a relationship with my mom and dad, my sisters and my brothers, my aunts and uncles and nephews and nieces. You know, I was like banished from my family for years. Almost a decade, actually, but that's beside the point. I was like person non gratis in my house. You know, the people would call up and say, "Is Jeff there?" They go, "Who?" You know, and when I first got clean, my family was still the same way. When I first called my dad, after I had about 90 days clean, I had already worked the first step. And now I was working on the 12th. You know, I got that first step down and when I was in treatment. I went through detox. I went to Calvary Rehabilitation Center on 329 North 3rd Avenue. I went through that detox on 7th Avenue in Lark, which they tore down. And it's no longer there. Right underneath the 7th Avenue Hotel. And it was a bad place, man. Like the cockroaches that smack you and take your sandwich and tell you, "We'll be back for lunch." You know, it was a blood and guts type place. It was just what I needed, actually. And I used to go down there because that's where my higher power was telling me, this is where you're going to wind up. This is your bottom. This is where you're headed if you don't stop now. And that's where I went to detox, and I went to this halfway house, and I was lucky. I went through the first group of addicts that went through this Calvary Rehabilitation Center. Before that, they've had these people that were addicted to other liquid drugs going through there all the time on a repetitive basis. And I was fortunate because I had a good group of men with me, and we learned about the steps. And at that time, thank God that the halfway house was co-ed. It wasn't co-ed, rather, excuse me. I'm real grateful it wasn't co-ed because what happened is I got to develop relationships with men, you know, and you know, I never really had much use for men. I never had much use for women either, except as customers, you know, to sell them my drug, to get me more drug, and to use drugs with. See, I had a love affair with my drug of choice for a long time. I didn't like that external stuff like relationships or intimacy or any of that stuff I didn't know anything about anyway, but I didn't like it. I knew I didn't like it. So I worked the first step and I was on the 12th step. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. So I had about 90 days clean, right? And I had this sponsor. I always got a sponsor. I've had a sponsor every day I've been clean. Even when I was in prison clean, I had a sponsor. You know, because sponsorship is really important. If you read our literature, it talks about it. You read the IPs, it talks about it. And it talks about that therapeutic value of one addict helping another. And here's the reason I got a sponsor. Okay? The reason I got a sponsor is because when I got in this way of life, and I came from another way of life that they used to have sponsors too, but they were not too nice of guys, but they used to sponsor you in the industry. And I had that guy in the corner that sponsored me for a lot of years. He used to sell me that bag all the time. He sponsored me. But when I was in the Marine Corps, and I was in Vietnam, I spent 2 years in Vietnam. And if there's any veterans here tonight, I applaud you, I honor you, I respect you, and my undying thanks, love, and gratitude for what you've given your nation, yourself, and each one of us, that we have the opportunity to stand in a room like this, free. When I was in Southeast Asia, when I first got there, I kind of like hung with the guys that didn't know how to stay there. I didn't, they used to call us newbies, FNGs. F stands for, and the N stands for new guys. So I didn't want to hang with them guys. I wanted to stay with the guys that knew who had been there a year and a half, 18 months. They knew how to stay alive. So when I got to Rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, I realized that when I heard that thing, stick with the winners, I went, wait a minute. Guys that have time must know how to do this thing, so I'll hang with them. And that's what I did. Nothing against people that bond and form relationships in halfway houses. But my best experience has been someone has always been around me with a lot more time than I had. So I got this first sponsor, and he was a really good guy. His name was Mark P. And he lives in California now, and he's still clean. And he says to me, I made a decision based upon my self-centeredness that I was going to reconcile my relationship with my family. So I got the little phone they used to have on the wall at the halfway house to call home. And I had about 90 days clean. I had done the first step. I was ready to carry this message to the addicts who still suffer, save the world. I called my mom and dad, and my dad answered the phone. I said, hello, Dad. He says, who's this? I said, this is Jeff. He goes, I don't have a son named Jeff. I lost him in Vietnam. I said, Dad, it's me. He said, listen, if you ever call this number again, it'll be changed. Click. And so I go to my sponsor. How could you do this to me? How could he say this to me? My sponsor says, relax, what step are you on? I said, I'm on the first step. He goes, well, let's do them in order. He says, when you get to the 9th step, you can do it. I go, yeah, but. You know, and I've been a yeah, but guy most of my recovery, but thank God my sponsors always give me the direction. What he said was, here's what we'll do. He says, when you get to the 9th step, we'll deal with that. And what we'll do is we'll write a letter. And in this letter, you tell your dad what you're doing. And in this letter, you'll say that on such and such a date at such and such a time, you're going to call that number. And that you hope and pray that he answers. Because you're being honest, you're being accountable, and you're showing integrity for your behavior. So, what happened was, I did that. But that's on the 9th step. I'm still on the first step. My dad answered. And I reconciled with my family. And I got to give the eulogy at his funeral. I got to give the eulogy at my mom's funeral. And I got to bond with them and reform that relationship that I had such disdain for most of my active addiction. You know. And so if you want, I don't say that's possible for everyone, because some of us lose our parents before we get here, and some of us don't have parents that we even want to reconcile with. I'm fortunate that I had parents that I wanted to reconcile with. And they wanted to accept my amends to them when I got to the 9th step. If I can encourage you to do anything, if you're new to this and you're thinking about stuff, especially around the holidays, and you want your family back and da-da-da-da-da, and it's a painful time for you, don't pick up no matter what. Work the steps in order, and miracles can happen. I know plenty of people that have reconciled with their family based upon working these steps. Miracles can happen. I got to the 2nd step, and I really didn't believe that I was insane, but my sponsor quickly pointed out some of my behaviors, you know. Insanity to me is repeating the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I continually did the same behavior over and over, is expecting the fear, the insecurity, and the low self-esteem, the hate and hostility to go away. And the only thing that I found since I've been here in the Rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, by not picking up one day at a time, some days 1 hour at a time, some days 1 minute at a time, whenever ounce of my being wanted to go out and find a narcotic solution to my temporary problem, I persevered. And what I found is that would be really insane thinking for me to think that something that I tried for 17 years of my life, just every day, 17 years of my life, didn't work. And I found something that has consistently worked, which is the 12 steps. So I got to the 2nd step, and I had to look down at my behavior. And I wrote down a lot of my behaviors that were pretty insane. You know, people like me with the complexion that I have do not go hang out in Harlem. I did. I don't know how it is now, but back in the day it wasn't like that. That's pretty insane. I never found a dealer in Harlem on Christmas morning. I don't know where the hell they all went, but on Christmas Day, they all had someplace to go except me. Insanity today is thinking that a drug can solve any of my problems. And like I said, my past really bores me. So I'm going to jump forward into the third step and get into the third step and being new in recovery and talk about the conscious contact that I developed when I got early in recovery. And early in recovery, I didn't believe in God. And a lot of us come here godless. I don't know. No, I can't say that. A lot of people guys come in here with higher powers and stuff. That amazes me. A lot of you guys come in here with jobs, and that amazes me. It was like this dude came in and said, well, yeah, I'm working and addiction became a problem to me, so I'm getting clean. I said, what? How can you do that? They said, well, didn't you work? I said, no. I was 29 years old and you guys were showing me how to fill out job applications. Because, I knew what I had to do and I did what I did and I knew what I knew how to do. And none of it was very legal. So when I got to rooms in Narcotics Anonymous, I didn't know anything I knew about unemployability, but I knew about dereliction, I knew about degradation, I knew about desperation. But see, I got here, it says in our book someplace, in desperation we sought help from each other in Narcotics Anonymous. And I must have got off in the sub-basement, because when I got here I was really desperate. I was really willing to listen to what you people had to offer. And I was willing to go to any lengths in order to stay clean. So I got to the third step, and my sponsor, being the great intellect that he is, knew that I had a problem with my higher power. I didn't believe in anything. I believed in an M16. I believed in hate and hostility. I believed in fear, and I believed in low self-esteem. And I didn't really know if this thing was going to work for a person like me. And I got to the third step, and he says, here's what we're going to do. He says, I'm going to bet you this amount of money, and I want you to do two things. I said, what's that? In the morning, I want you to say please. In the evening, I want to say thank you. He said, that's it? He says, yeah. I said, so what else? He says, well, at the end of the 30 days, if you don't feel better, I'll give you this bit of money. So I said, all right. So I went and did that for 30 days. Please in the morning, thank you at night. I even threw something at midday just to make sure when I took this money, I could feel comfortable with it. And at the end of 30 days, I felt better. And so I went to him. I said, well, I don't know what it is, but I feel better. He says, well, good. That means you're developing conscious contact with God of your understanding. I said, no kidding. He goes, and you practice a principle. And I was all about practicing principles. The only principle I knew was in high school, for God's sakes. He told me I practice the principle. And I lost the bet, and to be honest with you, it's the best bet that I ever lost. I got here early. I got here young. Young for me back in them days was 29. I go, and it's like, man, it's a whole bunch of people with gray hair, bald heads, in meetings. I said, man, if I was that old, I'd quit too. So here I stand before you, gray hair, bald, and I got here at 29, and I thought I was young. I hadn't had a job, and I knew that if I had any hope of staying clean for any length of time, I had to put down on paper my inventory. And I sponsor a lot of people, and it never fails me. I got two types of guys I sponsor: those that are willing to work the steps, and those that are willing to work the first 3 steps. And they get to that third step, man, and they get that spiritual enlightenment, and all of a sudden it's like they hit a wall. But for me, there's no hope for me if I hadn't have done that 4th and 5th step, because I'm the type of addict that I'm full of guilt, shame, remorse, fear, insecurity, and low self-esteem. You guys taught me how to faith, humility, open-mindedness, willingness, honesty, compassion, empathy. That's the stuff you gave back to me. And the only way I could make space in me for that is if I surrendered something. And I was the type of addict that was very hateful and hostile when I was out there. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame. I was like, you ever see Santa Claus when he's coming down the chimney with the big bag of gifts? That's how I was. And it was all full of shame, guilt, and remorse. And the only way I could possibly get rid of that, according to my sponsor, was by doing that inventory and sharing it with another human being. And I wrote, You know, what I did was I was sort of like the cesspool. You know, the cesspool, I think the shit that's in there the longest floats to the top. That's what I did. The stuff that was in there the longest floated to the top, and I took it off and I put it on paper, and I went and shared it. And my sponsor said, "You ready to share it with me?" And I said, "No, I'm not." I went and did it with somebody that was bound by law to keep secrecy. Because I still had stuff that had statute of limitations on it. And I trusted him, but not all that much. You know, and today my life is an open book. Today I share freely from my heart with the people that I sponsor the exact nature of my wrongs. Exactly what I've been through, what I've done, and what I'm like today. You know, and today I've become from being a mindless animal into a human being. You know, I never stayed clean in spite of my character defects. So I dumped all that stuff off the first time. And then I got to the 6th and 7th step, and I'm sure that pertained to you guys, but it didn't pertain to me. And if I could ever redo my life in recovery, I think that I would do a better job on the 6th and 7th step the first times. Because I put limitations on God. I made a contract with Him. I told Him exactly what He was going to take care of and exactly what I'd take care of. And consequently, at 13 years clean, I wound up incarcerated. Because one of those things that I would take care of, I didn't take care of so well. And the disease of addiction resurfaced. He talks about it in our text about how sex, drugs, money, greed, lust, fear of my mortality would awaken those feelings of inadequacy. And how I would no longer go to my higher power for solace, that I would think that I could fix things. So at 13 years clean, I wound up trying to fix things. And what I managed to do was lose my home. What I managed to do is to abandon a 14-month-old baby. What I managed to do was to abandon my 9-year-old son while I was incarcerated. And I don't say that with any pride. I say it with remorse, but I say it with forgiveness also, because by working these steps, I learned about self-awareness, self-worth, self-acceptance, self-love, self-trust, self-esteem, and self-respect by working these 12 steps. And I'll tell you, if you want to know about pain, I'll tell you about the pain for me was calling my home from prison and asking to speak to my son, and have my oldest boy get on the phone crying and telling me that his brother was crying, his little brother was crying, and that he couldn't wake up his mom, and that there was no food in the house. And he says, "Dad, what should I do?" At that point, if there had been an alternative, I may have taken it. I had completely responsibility as acceptance of my consequences of my action. And I had to accept that and admit that I was powerless. That was complete powerlessness. That was complete unmanageability. See, the disease of addiction is insidious. It manifests itself in many ways, and that's how it manifested in my life at one time. And I got through it. So, you know, what I also managed to do is I managed to start H&I meetings in the prison I was in. I managed also to, on the upside, I managed to have my children removed from the premises that they were living at that was so hostile, and get them sequestered in a place that was a little safe. And I managed to get them back in my life and be a responsible, loving, kind, productive parent to them. And I wish that for my ex also. So if you're new to the program and you kind of skimmed over that 6th and 7th step, from personal experience I've learned that because of my limitations that I put on the God of my understanding, I didn't benefit from all the fruits that this program gives us. The thing I did do is I did manage to stay clean through it. I did manage to sponsor people when I was in the institution. And I did manage to come to an understanding that when I went to that place, it became a spiritual sabbatical for me. An expensive sabbatical for my family. But it was exactly what I needed at that time, because I got to redefine who and what I was. I got to redefine what my priorities in life were. I got to redefine exactly what I wanted to do for myself, for my life, and for my fellowship. You know, I love Narcotics Anonymous. If I spend the rest of my life giving to Narcotics Anonymous, I cannot give back to what is given me, which was life itself. The first time I got to the 8-step, I had managed to reconcile with my parents. In 1985, I wound up in Washington, D.C. And when I wound up in D.C., there just happened to be a World Convention of Narcotics Anonymous going on at this hotel in D.C., and that's the reason I went there. And the other reason I went there was to go to that Vietnam memorial. And I wanted to go to that memorial for a number of reasons. First of all, it was a source of immense pain for me. Because some of those people that were on that wall, I put up there, based upon decisions made in combat that weren't the right decisions at that moment. And there were men up there that, because of the horrendous insanity of war, decided to take their own lives. And their names were up there. And I went there to give them homage, respect, and to hopefully have a little bit of forgiveness to myself. For myself. And today I have all the forgiveness in the world for it. I no longer have any pain associated with it. I have a lot of respect for those men that are up there. So I went there, and I went there with members of Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm telling you right now, if you think that whatever you're going through, because you all have your Vietnams, you all have your own wars, you all have your personal insanity. No matter what you go through in Narcotics Anonymous, you never have to go through alone. I've watched people deal with cancer, and they found other cancer survivors. I've watched people that like myself, that was molested at early ages, and I found men in this program that were molested. I found people that have been veterans that could help me how to walk this path and share their experience, strength, and hope, and how to come to an understanding and a healing of the process by working these steps. And I wound up at that wall, and it was 1985, and I cried like a baby. Remember when you were a little kid and mama spanked you or daddy spanked you and you just wailed? And that's how I cried against that wall. And you know, my mom used to tell me that the eyes are the windows of the soul, and every once in a while they needed washing. And apparently that day they needed washing a whole lot. And my understanding for me today is that I got to be willing to shed tears. I got to be willing to be honest with you and let those things come down the front of my face. Because if I swallow them and keep them inside, they just turn the acidity and the acid. They eat me up in the gut, and they come out sideways. So there's a certain freedom with crying that I found here in the rooms based upon your experience, and you guys have shown me how to cry. So I walked off this wall, and I had one guy left to make an amends to on my first 8-step. And his name was George Rollhausen. And George and I had been to Vietnam together. George and I had been rival gangs together. George and I had gone to boot camp together in different platoons. George and I had gone to Vietnam together in different companies. George and I had passed each other after a firefight in the same helicopter. George and I had gone to the brig together. George and I had gone into insanity together. George and I did deals together. And George and I overdosed together. And George and I used to sit around his mom and dad's kitchen table and eat tomato soup and rob a purse so we could get high. So me and George went like this. We were brothers. And one time I was involved in a legal enterprise with my friend George, and what happened was I left him there. You know, Jersey City cops were notorious lazy, and we both got busted for a stolen car, and they cut me loose, and they took him, and I made that obligatory promise, don't worry, George, I'll be back with the bail money. I got the bag. I went, bag, bail. Anyway, consequently, George stayed incarcerated, and I went on my merry way. But, you know, we talk about rocks, and we talk about how addicts in our addiction have a tendency to magnify those simple pebbles and making mountains out of molehills. It says so right in our basic text. And I carried this rock for like years, from 1972 to 85, I carried this rock about how I had abandoned my friend George after all we'd been through. At the time when we both caught the case together, I walked on him. And so, I really wanted to make amends to him, and I couldn't find him. I called, I looked through the phone book in Bayonne and Jersey City, and there's nowhere I could find George. But this is how it works. This is exactly how it works. See, my higher power has continually shown me through the Spirit exactly how it works when my eyes are open and my heart is clear. What happened was I came off that wall and went back to the gift shop at the World Convention in 1985 in Washington, D.C., and I backed into this guy, and his name was George. And I turned around, I said, George. I called him Spook because that was his nickname. Spook, what are you doing? He started jumping up and down. I started jumping up and down. We both started crying. Tommy Boscarelli was there. He started crying. And pretty soon we're all crying. We're hugging each other. I said, wait a minute. I got to make amends to you because I'm carrying this rock, I said, I got to make amends to you. He goes, okay, what for? So I take him outside and I get him just in that spot and I look him in the eyes. I say, brother, I'm sorry. Here's what I did. And then I remember that night. He goes, I don't remember that. Okay, here's an addict. I get angry. I've been carrying this rock for, 13 years now. I'm trying to get rid of it, and you don't remember it? So I explain it to him again, man. And he starts smiling. He starts laughing. He goes, Jeff, I was on parole. You could have been worth $1 million. I was violated. They would have never let me out. But that isn't really the story. What the story is George had the virus. And it was 1985, and he had 6 years clean, and he had the virus. And at one time, that virus killed a lot of people on a daily basis. Basically, it wiped out the whole service structure of Narcotics Anonymous in New Jersey, New York, and a few other large metropolitan areas. And he says, Jeff, I'm sick. I said, what's wrong? Yeah, we got the disease. He goes, no, man, I got the virus. I said, no. He says, well, listen, man. He says, I'm not dying. He says, I'm living. He says, if I spend the rest of my life, and here's where I got it from, giving to Narcotics Anonymous, I can't give back to Narcotics Anonymous what it gave me, and that was life itself. When I get to sponsor other guys that have the disease similar as mine, as well as the disease of addiction, and I let them know that the disease can be arrested, and they can be happy, loving, caring, fruitful members of society, and that I'm okay. And so me and George, we took the train up, the Amtrak up to Jersey City. We hung out. We told war stories. We bought pork pie hats together, and we hung out for a long time. And I used to call him every week from Arizona. And then when he passed away, they buried him in an Arizona Regional Narcotics Anonymous T-shirt. I talked to him on a Friday, and he passed on a Sunday, because back in the day when they used to give you that thing, that cocktail, sometimes they just go toxic on you. And that's what happened. And that was the gift that George gave me. And if you want what we have to offer, and you stick around here long enough, you'll see miracles walk into your life. If your eyes are open, you'll see people that will impact you. And I'm here to tell you, you say, oh, miracles, burning bushes, all that stuff. No, forget about it. I want to tell you that if you look from row 1 to the back of the house, to the people sitting up against the wall, each one of you have the opportunity to be a miracle worker. Each one of you have an opportunity to be a miracle worker on a daily basis by giving that message of hope and a promise of freedom. Just something that you say to another human being when the phone rings, when you're doing an H&I, when you're doing a PI commitment or phone line commitment or an H&I commitment going into the institution. There's people in here that know that for a fact. People come out of the institution and say, I want to thank you because when you gave that pitch in that jail, you impacted my life and things have changed and I'm clean today. Each one of you that sit in this room have an opportunity to be a miracle worker, to perform something beyond your wildest dreams. See, it says in the 7th step, there's one little line. And I'm sure I'm not going to quote it right, but I'm sure one of you basic text guys will know this, or girls. It says the main objective of the 7th step is to get you out of yourself and into doing God's will. So if you basically boil down all your defects of character into one little thing, into that little piece of rock that we love so much, some of us, or that piece of, whatever it is, down to the purest form, and there it is in 100% purity. The one defect that I have is self-centeredness. And the one asset I have is love, which is God's will, because love is God's will. It also says in the 11th step, for any of you people that are new to this program, make no mistake about this. Relapse is not God's will. I just had to get that one out. But anyway, the only way to offset self-centeredness is by doing selfless acts to others. And how do you do that? PI, H&I, like we have this H&I book drive going on. Phone line, sponsorship, service work. The people that I sponsor do service work. I have men that come up to me and go, would you sponsor me? I said, are we going to do service work? Oh, no. I won't sponsor you. If you don't want what I have to offer and we don't want to make the effort to get it, what can I do? The very foundation of our program is the therapeutic value of one addict helping another. It's really not, it's in the literature it talks about it. It says, fuck all the paperwork. It says the open weapon against the disease of addiction is another recovering addict. So how do I do service work to my fellowship? How do I give back to you what you gave to me, which is life itself? I give it through sponsorship, answering. I've got a couple of phone lines. You can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Being active in my home group, participating. And I'm here to tell you that if you're new to this program and you think that you're just going to take and be like a shoplifter, eventually you're going to come to steal and ain't going to be nothing there for you. But if you if you go to meetings to give rather than to take, most of the time if you go to give, you won't walk away disappointed. And if you make an investment in this program, if you're new to this program and you make an investment, it's like going to the crap game. You know, I had to throw them dollars down in order to get a bigger piece of the pot before you roll them dice. All my dice say God on them. If you invest in this program and participate, it makes it harder for you to leave. I know that. When I first got here, I really got active. I thought I was like Johnny Appleseed and I was going to save everybody in the world and start Narcotics Anonymous meetings all over the place. And the only person I wound up saving was myself. And we started some meetings along the path. And we did a lot of stuff. So, I'm going to close with one more thing and then I'm going to shut up. Because I know people really came here to dance. I never danced before I came to these rooms. Never did. I was like one of them tough guys that hang up against the wall. Then I found it was okay to make an ass of yourself one day at a time. And believe me, some of my dance partners can attest to that. But now I had to dance with joy today, and I had to dance with joy. That's right. I was real sick. I was in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And I was sharing at a convention up there. And this has nothing to do with me. And I was real sick and I was angry because it was cold up there and it was snowing, and how dare they ask me to come speak at their convention in the winter. That's how I felt about it. And I got there and I was mean, I was rotten, and I had this guy with me because he was kind of like, I was really sick with the hepatitis C, and I was on interferon, and I was very angry. It was right before I decided, no, never mind. Anyway, I got there, and I was getting in the elevator. And I don't know if you've been to conventions, you know how elevators get in NA conventions, they're like this. What's your hand, man? No. So everybody packs in this elevator, and then we stop on this floor, and this little girl gets in, and she's about 13 years old. And she looks at me, and she goes, "Hey, are you Jeff T?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Can I give you a hug?" And I looked at her, I go, "Oh, sure." My brain's saying paternity. No, I'm going. Because, I'm self-centered. I always work for, 90% of the time in the past, I worked from ego first. I went, "Yeah, sure." So she goes, "I really want to thank you." And I said, "For what?" She goes, when you were in New Orleans and you talked about doing a 4th and 5th step on Vietnam and getting some help for your stuff, she goes, "My dad heard you and he listened to you and he doesn't beat us anymore. And I want to thank you." And you could hear a pin drop. And I'm here to tell you, at that moment, if that would have been my last breath on this earth, I would know at that moment I had done God's will, not mine. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please help us improve our ranking so others can find us by putting a review on Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast index. Nawpod is ad-free thanks to the folks supporting the show with $1 more per month. If you enjoy listening, you can join them by going to nawpod.xyz and looking for the donate link. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.